Welcome to EnviroTube.
Across Ku-ring-gai we manage 1,100 hectares of bushland, and that's split up into a number of different vegetation communities. One of the key vegetation types is the blue gum high forest, which is a critically endangered vegetation community which has been reduced to about 5% of its original range. That means that it's in danger of becoming extinct without intervention and conservation management works. One of the key tools that we have to conserve the bushland is fire. But it's not just about lighting up a fire and walking away. It's about when we burn, how hot the fire is, and crucially, how frequently we burn. We've teamed up with a number of different land managers and a little bit of funding from local land services to answer that exact question.
So survey and monitoring really is the cornerstone of any ecological understanding of plants, animals, everything else you can imagine in our systems. Hi, I'm Mark Hui. I'm from the Centre for Ecosystem Science at UNSW in Sydney, and I lead a team. We call ourselves the TRE team, or the Threatened Rare Endemic Plant Ecological Research Team. Today, this is an example of our monitoring. We're setting up some transects to look at the recruitment of the canopy species in this beautiful blue gum high forest.
So because the blue gum high forest is in the middle of a lot of suburbs and housing, it's become quite fragmented, which means that the fire regimes become dependent on fires that are set by land managers, but they're constrained by what they can do for safety reasons. And that means that they can't always get the kind of fire that the forest needs into the system. So the land managers we've been talking to have said that they've noticed that there isn't as much recruitment of eucalyptus species as what they'd like to see. And they're concerned about whether that's falling below the levels that are going to replace the mature plants as they senesce and die. And they've also noticed that some areas that are long aren't burnt don't have the same woody species diversity in the shrub layer as what they'd like to be seeing.
The kind of monitoring and survey that you need to do, it depends on the question that you're trying to ask. So if you want to know whether or not a canopy species is producing seedlings and then recruiting into the next stage, you basically have to go out and monitor that set of canopy species. So that can be going out, tagging adult individuals, tagging seedlings, tagging juveniles, and then monitoring them over time to see how they persist or how they don't persist.
So the specific kind of monitoring we're putting in 20 by 20 plots in paired burnt and unburnt sites. And within those plots, we're running a 20-metre transect down the middle and counting every single woody shrub and canopy species within a 1.5 metres either side of that 20-metre transect. And then within the broader 20 by 20 plots, we're also counting every canopy species that's over a metre tall and tagging recruits. So as we're going up the transect, because it's a fixed transect, we can come back and revisit that time and time again. And we're counting all woody species, whether it's a seedling or a larger individual, and then measuring their height and diameter at breast height, which is sort of just a standard measurement for plants. And when we come back and do that again, any changes we can compare to the past and see how the density of individuals is changing, and also the composition with time since fire. So far we're finding really strongly that there's a much higher diversity of woody species in the burnt sites, and that's largely from the species coming back from the soil seed bank where they've been present as seeds but not as mature plants above ground. But then we're also finding at the sites that have been burnt at high severity with like a lot of fuel, that it's mostly dominated by species like acacia, which love hotter burns, but can sort of outcompete everything else and form a monoculture. With the tagged recruits, we've been finding differences between burnt and unburnt sites. One of the main species, Eucalyptus saligna, is doing much better at burnt sites. It's got most of its recruits there, but less in the long unburnt sites. And one of the other canopy species we've been looking at has the reverse trend. The question now is whether it's enough recruitment to replace mature plants as they die. That's something that's going to take a long time to figure out, but that's why it's so important to set up these long-term monitoring plots to start getting at it before it becomes a problem. So it's early days and we've only got a few sites out, 8 all up, which is enough to give us an idea of what's happening, but we really need to, one, monitor it for longer and also put in more plots to get a better representation of what's happening across the different parts of blue gum high forest. So it looks like fire management's had an impact on the sites, both positive and negative in some places. It's a real challenge to get fire management right anywhere, but particularly in these sort of urban reserves. But I think there's clear evidence that it's benefiting the community when it's being put in, and it's just a matter of figuring out where the line is between too hot a fire or too cool a fire and how frequently those fires go in, and that's something we're hoping to help answer.
So one of the clear and probably the best ways to explain the importance of survey and monitoring is you can go out and you can take some anecdotal observations, and like all experimental stuff starts with anecdotes. You go around and you can look and you can go, oh, that population's not looking so good, or there seems to be sort of less recruitment happening of these eucalypts, for example, that we're really interested in. But until you quantify that, until you actually look out in the field, measure over time whether or not there are seedlings recruiting or there are adults dying, you can't really get that true empirical understanding of what's going on. And having that basis is really important for then informing how you manage them. Really, ecological understanding is the cornerstone of pretty much every conservation principle that we have going.
Thank you to everybody who helps protect our bushland.